So if your middle school education was anything like mine, your experience with drug education may have looked something like this, where you're basically told that all drugs, cannabis included, would rot your brain and that you should stay away from them entirely. If your undergraduate experience was anything like mine, you may have had a friend, or maybe you were the friend, who told everyone the exact opposite, that cannabis was God's gift to earth, it was just a plant, there were no negative side effects, etc. Unfortunately, right now, the state of the science is relatively unclear. We're not entirely sure how the brain is affected by long-term cannabis use. What we hypothesize is that perhaps under sort of everyday baseline scenarios, the effects of chronic cannabis use on your brain were either really minimal or they were highly subject to individual variability. But that when the brain was challenged in other ways, we might be able to bring out those effects. So what we did is selected acute stress as this challenge. This is because chronic cannabis use is intricately linked with stress. Chronic cannabis users often report that they're doing so to cope with stress. So what we did is we recruited two groups of participants, chronic cannabis users and non-users, and had half of those complete a standardized stress paradigm, which involved really cold water to tap physiological stress and difficult arithmetic to tap psychosocial stress. We then had them complete two computer tasks, measuring a couple of different brain functions. One of those was inhibitory control. So I want you guys to imagine that you're in a car driving down Stadium Way, and all of a sudden you see a bunch of people dressed in butch costumes on the sidewalk. Inhibitory control allows you to inhibit your tendency to want to look at those weird and novel people and to continue driving. We also looked at cognitive flexibility. So again, imagine that you're driving down Stadium and you need to turn left to get groceries, but it's summer in Pullman, so for some reason that lane is closed. Cognitive flexibility allows you to adapt your route in order to find a different way to get groceries. So what we found overall is that, contrary to our hypotheses, stress actually didn't play a role in this relationship whatsoever. What we also found is if you look at overall sort of global performance, just accuracy or performance on the task, there were chronic cannabis users and non-users were basically identical in terms of how they performed. So the performance overall looked really similar. But when we looked a little bit closer at the data, what we were able to find is that chronic cannabis users and non-users were using slightly different strategies to get to the same end goal. So again, imagine you're driving down Stadium to get groceries. It's almost like our chronic cannabis users went to Dismore's and our non-users decided to go to Safeway. They both got groceries, they both completed the cognitive tasks, but they did so in slightly different ways. What this suggests is that research going forward should probably focus a little bit less on whether chronic cannabis use makes people better or worse, or whether it's terrible for your brain or great for your brain, and perhaps should focus a little bit more on how chronic cannabis use can change thinking, learning, memory, etc. Thank you.